Hello, everyone. Welcome to our week 7, and we are almost at the end. Okay, we are almost there to our final week. This week, we are going to be talking about money, international economics, and free trade. So, what's on tap for this week? Our lecture on international economics, comparative advantage, and free trade. Now, for this lesson, what I have, what I will prepare is this short PowerPoint, but also a uh, a video on the devaluing the dollar. So that will also comprise the lecture for this week. What I want to make sure that we talk about this week is your upcoming week 8 paper, which I'm assuming you have some questions on. So I want to make sure that we are clear on the expectations of that. Okay, so for this week, as I said, for this week and then next week for the critical assignment paper, the critical assignment, if you recall from week 1, is a biographical application paper, and it's 8 to 12 pages. So please keep your eye on that page requirement. If the page requirement is not met, you're going to lose some points. Okay, so and it's 8 to 12 pages. That means 8 to 12 pages of content, not 8 to 12 pages including the cover page and including your references. Okay, so those don't go into the 8 to 12 page minimum. And I also recommend that you try and not go for the minimum, right? And of course, you don't want to fill your paper with unnecessary material, but try and be as thorough as possible. 8 to 12, somewhere in the middle is 10, right? So shoot for 10, and you should be you should be in a very good position. Okay, so make sure that you keep your eye on that. The paper should include a short biographical summary of the theorist, and we'll talk about the economists that will comprise your paper, including the date, place of birth, education, if that is relevant, of course. And then other questions that should be answered include the following. And these are the historically important economists that you should consider for the paper. You should have already started to think about, if not already started writing your paper, but definitely you should have identified which of these economists you're going to write about. So you have Jeremy Bentham, right? Frederick Hayek, Thomas Malthus, Alfred Marshall, John Stuart Mill, Hyman Minsky, Ludwig von Mises, the famous Austrian economist, A.C. Pigot, David Ricardo, who is considered probably one of the top 3 greatest economists in the history of economics, Jean-Baptiste Say, Joseph Schumpeter, and then lastly, Thorstein Veblen. Okay, so these are the economists in this Hall of Fame list, if you will, right, of economists to choose from. All right, so critical assignment, okay. Who are the contemporaries of this economist? And by that we mean who were the ones who were writing at the same time, right? So there's obviously the classical economists, right? So you would find John Stuart Mill and David Ricardo right around the same time, and but certainly not at the same time of, say, somebody like Adam Smith, who was from the 18th century. John Stuart Mill and Ricardo are 19th century economists. So who are the contemporaries? Who are these? Who were the contemporaries? Who were the ones that were writing? The colleagues that were writing during the time of this economist? Who influenced him, and or who had he influenced? So, for example, uh, recalling Ricardo. Ricardo wrote about comparative advantage. That was one of his big contributions to economics. Well, certainly he was inspired and influenced by Adam Smith, who wrote about absolute advantage, right? So he improved economic theory by explaining the concept and creating the concept of comparative advantage, right? And then who has he influenced in the future? What was this economist's major contribution to the study of economics, and why is it important? Now, it's not just sufficient to say that this economist did A, Y, and Z, but why is it important for today's economics, both academics as well as in practice, right? 2021 society, 2021 political economy. Why is this important for today's economy? And then, how do you think this economist would view the most recent worldwide financial crisis? Right. So we're talking about we can consider the most current one, right, the one we are living through today, as a worldwide financial crisis. It's not like the financial crisis of 2009, 2008, 2009. But it is a financial crisis of sorts, right? It's a crisis that has to do with a pandemic, a global pandemic. It has to do with an impact in overall GDP, world GDP. It has an impact on trade. It has an impact on employment. It has an impact on savings. It has an impact on fiscal policy also. So many impacts, right, that this crisis has. Well, you can discuss this crisis. You can discuss the crisis of 2008. Okay, so how would this economist view that crisis? What are the factors leading to it? What should have been done to correct it? Okay, if there's anything that could have been done to correct it. Okay, and then what factors should be in place to prevent it happening again? Okay, all right, so this is what your critical assignment is asking. All right, so now for this week's lecture, as I said, part of the lecture is the video that is supplements our very brief discussion for this week. So what is money? What is it and how does it work? Okay, well, money is different things. Money is a unit of accounting. It is a store of value and is a medium of exchange. So it's a unit of accounting because we we measure, for example, financial gain in terms of money, right? When we look at, for example, net income or profit, well, it's not just a hypothetical number. It has a real meaning, right? So it's a unit of accounting. You count it in dollars, right? You look at financial statements and everything is expressed in dollars. So it's a unit of accounting. Money is also a store of value. And if you very briefly you think about if you think about your own situation, your own experiences, how do you determine your wealth, your worth, right? Your family's worth, your own personal worth, and you look at your assets, right? Well, I own a house, or I own an apartment, or I have X amount of money in the bank. This is where you store value. This is a store of value, right? If you have money in the bank, or in savings, you are storing value in those accounts. If you have a home, you are storing value in the property value of that home. So money is a store of value. And then lastly, money is a medium of exchange. And this third one is very important because it is what makes international trade possible. We exchange, we buy and sell. The U.S. trades with other countries, and they need dollars. The U.S. Needs dollars from other countries, and other countries need whatever other currencies they have. And so you essentially you're trading dollars for pesos, or for yuan, or for Japanese yen, or whichever, right? Whichever currency. So it is a medium of exchange, and the terms of trade, the exchange rates, are what determine the trade flows between countries, and whether trade is positive or negative for a country. So again, money as a medium of exchange, it is modern currency. Okay, it is in its modern form, money is issued by a government and used as this medium of exchange. In the past, the medium of exchange, or the currency, may have been stones, or precious metals. In ancient America, in Latin America, Mesoamerica, it was cocoa beans. That was at one point considered money. Okay, so in the modern currency, we're talking about paper coins, paper money, and coins. Okay, and this is issued by a government. In the case of the United States, it's the U.S. Treasury. So what do we mean by pegged versus fiat currencies? Pegged currencies are pegged to a commodity such as gold. So way back, the United States had the gold standard, or um, the value of the dollar was pegged to the ounce of gold. Okay, so the U.S. currency was initially pegged to the gold. This was called the gold standard. But as trade liberalization and the necessity for being able to grow at higher rates uh, caused or promoted the U.S. to consider leaving the gold standard and adopting what we now called fiat currencies. Okay, and and so once you left the gold standard, fiat currencies, which fiat, it means trust. Okay, so these currencies are worth whatever each country says they are worth. And now that may sound kind of weird, right? Because it's not just that the country says, well, this is how much our currency is worth. Sure, they can say whatever they want, but fiat currencies means whatever the country says they are worth, based on what other countries believe that currency is worth. So it's not just sufficient to say our currency is worth such and such, but does that currency hold its value? And I'll give you an example, very brief example of how how this can very quickly turn and change. In 1990, Nicaragua introduced its new currency called the Cordoba Oro, the golden Cordoba, if you will. And it was introduced at 1-to-1 with the US dollar. And then very quickly devalued to 2-to-1. and then very quickly to 10 to 1. And now, today, it's 35. Okay? It's 35 to 1. So you can see how depending on what the currency is worth in the market, in the international market, and what others believe that the currency is worth, is really what determines the value of the currency. Okay, so that's an interesting fact about fiat currencies. Now, again, fiat currencies are based on trust. Okay, and one of the great things about the US dollar is that a lot of people in the world trust the dollar. And in fact, this goes back to the Second World War. And when, in fact, after the Bretton Woods conference and the Marshall Plan, of course, to rebuild Europe, the lone standing currency in the world that people could trust at the time was the dollar. And so the dollar gained its international standard as the standard currency. Okay, it is the most trusted currency in the world, and this goes back again 67 years to the time of the Second World War. All right, and it's still today considered a reserve currency by many nations because it is considered safe. In fact, if you go to places like Nicaragua or countries in Latin America, and you take out a $20 bill, it is accepted anywhere, which is not the case if it was the other way around. Right? You take out a Nicaraguan Cordoba and try to pay coffee in New York, and they're going to laugh at you, right? So that's the value of the dollar. It is generally accepted just about in every country. There are a few exceptions of countries where they don't accept them, but it's not because they don't trust it. It's because there are restrictions for it or against it, but certainly not because it's because of a lack of trust. Okay, so the dollar is the most respected currency in the world. There are other respected currencies in the world: the euro, the British pound, the Japanese yen, and the Chinese renminbi or RMB. The RMBs is as they culturally call them. The Chinese RMB is also known as the yuan. Okay, and of course, in the last few years, the Chinese currency has gained a higher status around the world because of the impact and the growth that China has had recently. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of a fiat currency? Well, one advantage is it can be manipulated by a central bank when needed to prevent or control financial panics or meltdowns, right? So you can always print more. You can always create use the tools that you have, right, to take the money out of circulation, okay, like sell bonds, all right. So there's you can use monetary policy to control the amount of it in the market. So that's one very big advantage. One disadvantage is that it can be manipulated by a central bank in ways that work to the advantage of a government that is corrupt, like, for example, the unfortunate case of Zimbabwe. So the lesson here is that for fiat money to be successful and to hold value, it needs to also be accompanied with strong financial institutions that will also give it trust and solidity, right? It'll be solid, and it will create that generalized trust by investors and by anybody that wants to hold that money in their bank accounts or use it as a medium of exchange. We've seen, in fact, dollarization in places like Ecuador or El Salvador. These countries have adopted the dollar as their currency. Their local currencies, in Ecuador, for example, the sucre is no longer the currency. In El Salvador, the Salvadorian colon is no longer the currency. It's now the dollar. So these countries have adopted the dollar because they trust the dollar, and the dollar gives their economy stability and a solid base, right? So that's how advantageous it can be for a country. Advantages and disadvantages of floating currency, okay? And some advantages, for example, supply of gold is limited. So a floating currency keeps gold reserves from being exported to other countries. It also protects a country's currency from sudden shocks in other countries. Uh, Also, other floating currencies are sometimes manipulated by other countries to gain export advantages. So, for example, this is the case with China. Okay, if China has been, I don't want to say the word accused, but or the complaint against China has been by countries like the U.S. that it artificially is keeping the value of its yuan, its RMB, low to give them that trade advantage. Because as we know, China is an exporter. China always holds a trade surplus because they export much more than they import. And the only way for them to keep that comparative advantage, the only way for them to keep those terms of trade to their favor, is by devaluing their currency or keeping their currency's value low relative to the dollar, which makes their Chinese products cheaper in the world, and therefore it makes them much more marketable. And that has been the criticism and complaint of U.S. Administrations in the past and other countries that consider that China is using unfair uh, fiscal policy, monetary policy, and trade policy uh, in order to keep its advantage as an exporter. Okay. All right. So again, I hope that you enjoyed this short presentation. Please watch the video on that's also provided here. This video is on the devaluing of the U.S. dollar, and I think you're going to find it interesting. Please also make sure that you carefully review the requirements for your Week 8 critical assignment. And as always, I hope you enjoy this week. Have a wonderful week. God bless you, and I will see you next week. Thank you very much.